This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, creators of the annual Brewers Retreat. To brew on the Maine coast June 9th through 12th with legends like Vinny Cilurzo of Russian River, get tickets now at brewersretreat.com. Welcome to the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm your host, co-founder and editorial director of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, Jamie Bogner. My guest on the podcast today here in Nebo, North Carolina, on the Whippoorwill Farm is Todd Boera of Fonta Flora, which has its own nice little rhythm to it, Todd.
Sure does, yeah. Hey, y'all.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Cool. We're going to get into a conversation about brewing here in a second, but first, just want to tell you that as the brewing industry's premier choice for glycol chilling, G&D Chillers has set the standard on quality, service, and dedication to their customers' craft. For 25 years, G&D has led the way on custom, innovative solutions that match brewing customers' immediate and future needs. Thinking outside the box, whether it's simple relocation of the utility connections for a complex buildup or ground-level design and engineering, G&D is ready to meet the challenge. Contact G&D Chillers today for your chiller sizing needs at 1-800-555-0973 or reach out online at gdchillers.com. Also, this episode is brought to you by the Craft Brewers Conference and Brew Expo America, America's largest craft brewing industry gathering. Join your peers in Denver, April 8th through 11th. Details at craftbrewersconference.com. All right, we're here in this beautiful, idyllic location in rural North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And, having this conversation with you, my y'alls from the past are going to start coming back out.
Yes, they are.
Tell me a little bit about how, your brewing arc started, Todd, and how you got interested in this and how Fonta Flora came to be.
So you're asking brewing backstory in general?
Yeah. A couple minutes. Let's just want to hear your, a little bit of your story before we start talking about technical stuff.
Sure. Yeah, it's an important thing to, hash out the history. Homebrewing, which we were discussing earlier, more and more people getting into professional breweries, from being homebrewers. And so I was a really fierce homebrewer, and I love my first homebrewing story. I was given a beer kit from a friend of my mom's who she worked with, and, the buckets, that whole thing, carboy. And I went to the homebrew store and I marched in there and I bought a kit, and I came with a little book, and I didn't really know anything about it. I was a bread baker at the time, thanks to my grandfather. And so I was like, this is going to be a really cool transition from baking bread to brewing. And I bought the kit, took it home, it was extract all, cooked it on my stovetop. And when it was time to pitch the yeast, I'm scrounging around in the box and there was no yeast. And being a bread baker, I had, Red Star bread yeast on hand. So I just whipped up a little starter. And so the very first beer that I ever made was fermented with Red Star bread yeast. So I've always wanted to kind of return to that one day and make, sort of that very same beer. As you might imagine, it was really bad. But I think
that's why you want to make it again.
And that's why I want to make it again. Yeah. But I think that I could do it and it could be okay now.
Yeah.
But anyway, so home brewing is what, took me down, a really long, obsessive road into brewing. And in college, it just took over my life. And I was brewing every chance that I could. I was trying to start a brewery on my college campus with another friend who is the head of the, I think it's called Overworks, or that might be, is that Firestone that calls themselves Overworks, the sour program, or is that the Brewdog Overworks?
It's probably Brewdog.
Yeah. So Rich Kilcullen, he's head of their sour program in Scotland, and he and I tried to start a brewery on our college campus, and that did not work out for many reasons, as you might expect. And so, I convinced multiple professors in different areas of study to allow me to conduct, and the registrar to do independent studies in different brewing focuses. So I did biology, microbiology of brewing, chemistry of brewing, the history, archaeology of brewing was really, really cool. So I got credits for doing that stuff. Meanwhile, all the while just constantly, home brewing in my dorm, and all of the people that I lived with really hating me because I was pretty gnarly about nobody coming near my equipment in the community kitchen. So not an ideal place to actually be brewing. But so I went from there to sum this up, talked my way into a brewing job at Catawba Brewing Company. They're located in Morganton, which is where we started as well before moving out to Nebo on Whippoorwill, old Whippoorwill Dairy Farm. And I didn't have any brewing experience. I was just a fresh home brewer, and talked him being the owner and brewer at the time, in taking a chance on me. And so they, I didn't really have to work my way up very much. Like I delivered kegs at first, and but sort of in between, kind of getting to spend time on the brew deck. So so that's why I moved from the Asheville area down to Morganton, just because it was an incredible opportunity that I couldn't pass up, to just be able to put the boots on right away, and not have to only scrub floors, but be scrubbing floors while mashing in. And so that was a pretty incredible opportunity, and I took that, and I was the head brewer there, or worked my way up to be the head brewer there I was there for about 4 years. And it was there that I really started to experiment with a lot of funky beer styles, and more unique ingredients and techniques and processes, and like all that stuff. And so that just kind of paved the way for, but I ultimately wanted more, and I wanted to do that all the time. And so that's what kind of, led me to open up Fonta Flora Brewery. My business partners nabbed me as I was leaving town. I was moving out west. I had a one-way ticket to Portland, Oregon, and still ended up going, and spent about a month hanging with friends, and visiting breweries out there, and all that. But then ultimately came back and started Fonta Flora Brewery. We were a 4-barrel brew house in a tiny 1,600 square foot building in downtown Morganton, all hardwood floor, basement underneath, the whole. Just, no way to have deliveries, like just the worst possible, like functioning place to have a brewery, but aesthetically it's a really incredible space. And, then
I think there's pictures and a story about that in an older issue of Craft Beer and Brewing magazine, Old Breakout Brewer Story.
There is, for sure. Yeah,
if you want to see those in person, check it out on beerandbrewing.com, or pick up the back issue. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, that was a good plug. I like that. Yeah, that was a very exciting time for me when that when y'all ultimately reached out and that happened. That was obviously really.
You don't have to say that. I'm not the Hollywood Foreign Press. Yeah. This is.
It was a big deal though, and I mean, it really anytime. I think that's just sort of part of it. It's like anytime you get any publicity like that, it feels good, and then especially like sort of what y'all do and kind of who it's geared towards.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that Fonta Flora vision.
Yeah.
And your beers tend to have, or I shouldn't say they're not all the same, because we're drinking a light lager right now.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
And the other one that you've pulled out for us to drink is something completely different than that. Clearly there's a spectrum there, and so we can't pigeonhole you into one thing. But there is. A drive that that kind of underpins the beers that you're best known for, and that's a very kind of herbal, botanical, ingredient heavy mix with foraged natural ingredients.
Yep.
And I know that's something you're personally pretty passionate about.
Yeah, exactly. That was well said. I mean, we run the gamut right now with what we make, and so while we're trying to almost sort of rewrite how people know us, because for the longest time, when we were making tiny amounts of beer, like incredibly tiny amounts of beer at our original location, the only beer that really left our house was our mixed culture beer. It was what we felt the most comfortable with. It was the easiest to do in our space. Just invest in a a 6-head wine filler, and be doing all bottle conditioned, a range of styles, but all mixed culture. And so those are the beers that left our brewery, and people started trading or whatever, and And then when we really started releasing some of our fruited sour beers, once they started coming out of barrels, that kind of brought us a good bit of attention for those beers. So that's what we're known for, I'd say. And so now our challenge is, now that, especially since we're making more beer at our new location, and we're packaging, we're still doing lots of bottle conditioned mixed culture beers. But we also have our own canning line, and we make a wide range of styles. I'd say more often than not, I mean, you're going to find, lagers in our tanks. And, I'd say the common thread, amongst all of our beer styles is we're 100% local malt, in every single beer.
Really?
So, from IPAs to stouts, the stouts are a little bit trickier. We are purchasing specialty malts from different places, but the base malt in absolutely everything is southeastern malt. And so for a variety of reasons, we chose to go down that path, and we weren't always that way. We were using, for IPAs for a while, we were using Weyermann, and then it just kind of it was like, we're buying. Weyermann malt is coming all the way from Germany, and of course we could, switch to Briess or something a little bit closer to home. But then our local maltsters just started upping their game, and all of the malt is just really fantastic. And so we've been learning how to work with it the best. And so I mean, the IPAs that we're making are incredibly phenomenal. And so that's sort of what we're trying to push more, so that people kind of start talking about our IPAs in a favorable way, just letting people know that we make these. And the same with lagers.
Let's talk about that kind of malt base for IPA. It's not a subject I thought would come up on this, but great beers are made from select ingredients with BSG. You'll bring the world to your brew house with an unparalleled and diverse selection of ingredients from across the globe to just down the road. Their dedicated customer service team and industry experience provides you with the assistance you need in every step of the way. Let BSG be your supplier of choice for products essential to making great artisanal beverages, so you can stay focused on your craft. For more information, visit them at bsgcraftbrewing.com or contact them at 1-800-374-2793. Also, Ska Fabricating is the craft industry's leading choice for packaging line automation, specializing in depalletizing, repalletizing, conveyance, rinsing, drying, fill detection, and date coding. Ska Fab has over 600 installations in breweries, wineries, and distilleries worldwide. With a reliable team of engineers dedicated to fast, reliable customer service, you can count on them to provide systems custom tailored to your specific needs. Contact Ska Fab today at 970-403-8562 or reach out online at skafabricating.com. So as we were saying, you found that even local base malt changes or improves. I shouldn't say improve. I'd say gives your IPAs a character that you enjoy. Because what's good and bad in that kind of case is certainly subjective. But from your perspective, what was it about this kind of locally malted base malt that moved the IPAs in the direction you wanted? And from a sensory perspective, can you describe what that impact was?
So a lot of it was actually to do with the maltsters getting better and offering malt with less taste, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So for the longest time, the only malt that was available was 6-row barley, and we still use that quite a bit in even in one of our flagships, our wit beer. It's still made with 6-row Pilsner malt. And so for the longest time, for mixed culture beers, for saisons, even clean saisons, we were using that malt. We were using 6-row barley. And I didn't want to make an IPA with 6-row barley. I did not want to taste the grains in that way in my IPAs. And so that's why for the longest time we would purchase Weyermann Pilsner malt for our IPAs. And our maltsters started getting better, and they were able to work with local farms in order to secure 2-row crops. And so We have 3 predominant maltsters in North Carolina, pretty close to where we are, and all of them offer a 2-row Pilsner. And so when that started happening, we started experimenting with that 2-row Pilsner and realized that it would work really well, like just the same level of quality, in our opinion, as what we were buying from Wireman.
Now, correct me if I have the story wrong, but I mean, there was a fair amount of agronomics that went into the entire process for local maltsters in North Carolina to be able to get 2-row barley that grew well here, that also, could be malted into the kind of quality that you're looking for. And so, the farming component was also, part of this. And so there was a lot of legwork that was done years ago to even get to the point where you have this opportunity.
Totally, yeah. And I mean, obviously, a large push is coming from the maltsters as well, is actually like making those relationships with the farmers and encouraging them to find those varieties and to grow those varieties, and then guaranteeing them that they are going to purchase the lot. So it's not as much of a risk for the farmers to just all of a sudden one day, go out there and plant 2-row barley in hopes that some magical, company is going to come along and buy it, whereas they had that promise, that commitment from these maltsters to start experimenting with those crops and to move away from 6-row, or in addition to growing 6-row.
Sure, and then from an agronomic perspective, there are all sorts of concerns for a farmer. You plant 2-row, if your yield is lower, well, you're going to have to sell it for a higher price. And how do you get more for it? Well, you have to have the maltsters that are willing to guarantee you, a certain price on, based on the amount that they're growing and the land they've got. And, I know people who pay for craft beer and pay a premium for the price for craft beer don't always consider, what that means, because that price for that malt gets passed down to you. And it's certainly more expensive to buy, locally malted, locally grown base malt. I mean, I've heard as much as 4 times more expensive than
totally. Yeah. When that was the kind of the crazy challenges. I mean, especially if you're looking at things from, business perspective. I mean, we went from, Wireman Pilsner, which is a fantastic product, to, moving to a local Pilsner 2-row, and we're paying almost double.
Wow.
So it's not only, it's like we switched to malt, and you're wondering if the quality is going to stay the same. So you're not even necessarily sure right away that you're like staying linear with the quality, and you're paying double. And so, that was a hard thing to swallow. But for us, it just kind of like, it's the same kind of thing when you start shopping locally for your food. Like, you stop thinking about things in terms of, well, that is cheaper than this. That conventional grown whatever is cheaper than this, organic or local. It just becomes the cost of the food, because that's what food should cost. And so for us, that's just ultimately what it came down to. It was like, this is what it takes for local farms to grow this, and then local maltsters to malt it, and then this is what it comes to us as. And so we just tried to build it into our business model the best that we could. But that's also the most challenging thing that we deal with as a brewery, is trying to get, without, all of our packaged product just screaming like, local or whatever, like having that on the labels. How do we get the point across to the consumer that this is why you should pay a little bit more for our beer, and this is why you should be okay with it, and hopefully, I mean, there are those people out there, because people are buying our beer, but it's that story that's the most important thing. It's like we try our best to let everyone know that all of our beers are brewed with local malt, but how do we tell that story if we're sending beer to New York or to California, or if you come and visit our tap room, of course, like we can have that, that discourse. But, that conversation is what everyone is trying to figure out, of like how to let everyone know that, you're drinking, a really a sustainable product in that way.
And I think that sustainable piece is kind of where it goes to. I mean, obviously, brewers are debating that whole question of local versus best, and it's something that becomes hard to parse out. But I think the philosophically important part there is that sustainability and that ecosystem that you develop then as a business, supporting other local businesses, supporting, and creating an economy then that raises everybody.
Yep.
Rather than moving to some lowest common denominator. And there, like you said, there are places, there are necessities within the world of brewing that require. I mean, there's just only so many places you can grow quality of hops that that we need for the taste of current beers, and so of course they're going to be grown in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, we're not using local mosaic hops. Yeah,
right. And there are certainly beer styles that can benefit from the vitamin malt that you talk about, and for many brewers around the country, like they don't there are places where barley just doesn't grow like
That's
that.
Right.
You are lucky to be here in North Carolina where you have that opportunity.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we've always just kind of looked at it that way, that, we've been able to advertise, brew the way that we do, and, market, ourselves the way that we do, in a huge reason being the local maltsters that took that first step to do so. And, just to like add to that, like you mentioned, the quality thing. And that's why it took us so long to switch over from the malt that we were using for our IPAs, because for me the quality wasn't there. So like us as brewers, we were almost pushing our local maltsters to develop, to find the 2-row, to malt it well, and to give us a product that it was, obviously the price was different, but of equal quality. And so that's why when that finally happened, it was like we can move our IPAs to local malt, and we don't know, and we don't notice a difference negatively.
Right. That's an interesting one. I imagine that if as that demand grows, that they will face some constraints, and it's the similar constraints that brewers face. The demand is there right now, but capital investments are pretty significant, and you have to measure how fast to grow your business, how much debt to take on, how much bigger you can get.
For sure.
So we'll see where the local malt goes, but that connection to the agriculture seems important to you. Obviously, you've now relocated your production, or you've added a production brewery on top of the Morganton 4-barrel system. You now have 15-barrel system out here in the country, at the mouth of the Linville Gorge, on a former dairy farm.
Yep.
And have built this thing out in the middle of nowhere. But you're very intentional about talking about that connection to the land and the farming that you have planned here at Whippoorwill Farm.
Yeah, that's right. This was a huge, it was always a dream of mine for sure to build a brewery on a farm. I never thought I would realize it. My family doesn't come from money. I don't have money. I don't have land in my family. So it was like, okay. And that was something that was, that was presented to me early on. I studied agriculture at Warren Wilson College just down the road from here on the way to Asheville. And my agriculture professor phrased that to me one day like that. Like, what are you planning on doing with this degree? Does your family have money? Do you have land in your family? Like, what's your plan after this? And I didn't know. And I knew that I wanted to farm, and I was obsessed with brewing at the time, like I told you. And so I knew that I wanted to brew. I had no idea at the time, like how the two were actually going to end up, like fully, intertwined. So that was always on my mind, especially like getting the opportunity to travel through Europe and seeing, really old farmhouse breweries, in France and in Belgium. So, there was just something that I constantly thought about. And, when my business partners and I opened up the Morganton tasting room, that was a dream come true all by itself. I was like, this is great. Like, I'm going to get to be in control of, the beer program and the beers that we brew, and, like the whole shape of a brewery. And then, we wanted to expand, and we didn't know how. And we looked at, early on, we looked at property in Charlotte and thought that we might add another brewery in Charlotte. We thought that we might add another location, a larger one in downtown Morganton. And then ultimately, this property came up for sale, and it was a really complicated process of how we ended up obtaining it. But we partnered with our land conservation group in Morganton, and that's how we purchased the entire tract of land. It was 53 acres. About 45 was purchased from them, and they donated their portion to Lake James State Park, which already borders us. Our land is under permanent conservation as part of our deal, them going in on this with us. So it's just really, there's so many layers to it that are just really incredible. And so, for me,
when you did this and when you bought this property, the county that you're in was a dry county.
Yes.
So something I've never, I've never ever in all of my talks with brewers found a brewery that decided to put a production brewery, buy a property and build one in a dry county.
Oddly enough, Jester King is the example of that.
Really?
Jester King was unable to conduct retail sales on their property for, I believe, their first 2 years as a brewery. And so this county was dry, and we are close with the county, a few county commissioners. My business partners are specifically. And so there was a lot of chatter about, the county going wet.
Right.
And so, obviously, there are city ordinances, in Morganton. We're in Burke County in Morganton, but which was why we were allowed to conduct business there. But yeah, the county, you could sell alcohol in the county if you were I'm doing hand quotations right now, a sports bar. And that doesn't sound like what I'm saying. Like, it's not just having TVs and showing football games. It was like you could have tennis courts or basketball courts or a golf course or an equestrian facility. So we were trying to figure out all these ways to we were like, should we build tennis courts out here? And it was just like, no one's going to use them. So we were going to do all those things, and then the county commissioners were like, look, we think that this is going to, turn in your favor. Yeah. And so then there was a vote on it, and they put it on the ballot on a non-election cycle. So no one went out to vote. And so it passed with flying colors. So when we originally bought this land and we were building out, we just sort of thought that we were going to be, distributing our products. And, we've been brewing here for about a year now, but our tasting room opened in September. So we haven't even had really to experience the spring and summer of what it will bring out here. So we're really excited to get through. I mean, January is abysmal for every business, no matter really where you are, but let alone for us.
And this area is very tourism driven, and it's very spring and summer tourism driven.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we're right at the Lake James State Park is the second most visited state park in the state of North Carolina, and tons of mountain bike trails. Yeah. I mean, just it's an outdoor mecca.
I'm going to bring my bike next time I come out
here.
All right.
We can shred.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the other approach to brewing that you're really well known for, and that's that botanical ingredient, herbal ingredient approach.
Sure.
Every time I see a beer from you that has a long litany of ingredients, I immediately thought, how do you conceive of that mix of ingredients with that many variables, and how in your own brewing process do you evaluate those ingredients and then mentally put together the picture of how that beer, how you can combine those to create the beer that you want to taste the way you want to taste?
Yeah, that's such a great question. A lot of homebrewers often ask me that question, and then I look at them and I say, you should be the one telling me this, because I don't homebrew anymore. And so, but that was the point of why I started homebrewing, and to have the ability to have a 5 or 10 or 15 gallon, whatever you're working with, batch. Right. It's much more, I mean, obviously, it's all relative. There's still a lot at stake, people's time and money and everything. But, you're able to truly experiment at a very reasonable level when you're homebrewing. For us, when we're making a 15 or 30 barrel batch, things get really real. I often approach ingredients, I would say, much more like a chef, much more how I like to cook. And after you've used some ingredients, you sort of you begin to understand how they work together. I would be careful with that because I was just sitting out. So it might be,
I'm going to open a bottle
that might
of
be a gusher.
Torches Volume 2 so we can talk about this one for a little bit.
Yeah. So that's our approach. We've been doing it for so long now that, again, like we've began to understand how some ingredients, how they act similarly to others. And so that's just always been the goal for us. And, it's just constant experimentation. And that's really the only way, we were going to learn, how much, like for this particular beer, there's just a wide range of botanicals in this. So
you say experiment, but what does experiment look like? I'm interested in the process. Is it throwing in the tank and tasting it, throwing more in the tank? Or,
absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So,
are you making steeping teas or evaluating cold steeping, or what does that?
Yeah, we don't really employ like the tea method so much. We try to use the beer itself as the actual liquid for the extraction. So for instance, again, like this beer, this Torches Volume 2, a lot of these ingredients went in hot side, and that's a little bit of a challenge because you need to be exact when you're doing that stuff. If you overdo it, you're kind of in trouble. So then you have to, blend back or something if you have even the stock or the capabilities of doing so. How
often does that happen to you?
Oddly enough, it sounds pompous to be
yourself.
like, we hit the nail on the head every time. But like, even so when we're doing hot side ingredients, unless, we've worked our way up to knowing, we always start out lighter at a rate that we all feel comfortable with based on, we know like how many barrels this is and how many, how many pounds or whatever, or ounces of, this particular ingredient. And so we just always start on the low end and then we turn to cold side if you can achieve the same flavors. And that's also part of the challenge. But like with Torches Volume 2 here, a lot of holy basil went into the the whirlpool of this beer hot side, and after fermentation, we brewed this with my fiance. She wanted more of a holy basil, more of that tulsi aroma out of it. So we just kept dry basiling this beer. So we put in a pound, and then she was like more, and I was like okay, and we did another pound. Then she was like more. And so we put in another pound until we got to like 4 pounds of basil in the dry hop. And so that's an example for us of experimenting where it's easy to do so in something like secondary, where you can just keep adding and and tasting. The most important thing, just tasting along the way and realizing like this is where we want it to be. And until you achieve that, if you have the capabilities of to keep going, and that's what we did. So now, if we make this beer again, we'll either add more, holy basil and hot side, or we'll start out with, a 3 to 4 barrel or 3 to 4 pound, dry
basil.
Yeah. Dry basil. So, but they're extremely challenging because that's the part of brewing where there is not much information out there.
Sure.
And so like, the folks, I point to them all the time. They're very good friends and they're extremely talented brewers, but, Marka and Aaron at Scratch, they're just like, they're a wealth of knowledge, and, their beers that they create. That's why they wrote a book. Because they are a book of, of how to do, how to brew with these ingredients. And, everybody knows that you can put all of those different strange ingredients in beer, but it's always like you get stumped with how much do I add,
right?
And so we just brewed an IPA with white pine. It was a super snowy day, and we marched to the back of our property, and we had axes, and it was right after a snowstorm, so that we didn't actually have to do much of like cutting a tree down. There were down trees everywhere. And we just hacked basically a whole tree, all the branches off, and we all hauled it, back to the brewery. And, we were sort of taking the stems off and trying to get the needles off. And everyone was like, well, how much are we adding? I was like, I don't know. And so we were like, well, what if we just fill up your pickup truck bed full of it, and then we'll just write it down like we put a pickup truck bed full of pine needles, in this beer. And that's what we did. And we ended up filling our Whirlpool tank full of pine branches, and the beer was perfect. And would I say that if there were like 2 pickup truck beds full, like maybe it would have had the same result? I don't know. Maybe a little bit less. It probably would have had the same result. But that kind of stuff is just kind of fun. Like I want to like write that recipe down like that, and then someone find it like 100 years later, and they're like, "What the hell is a pickup truck bed full of pine needles?"
Future Ron Pattinson, 100 years from now,
yeah, totally.
will dig up the brewing archaeology, find that recipe, and not know what the hell to make of it.
Exactly.
Let's talk about some of your other favorite interesting ingredients, and some that you find yourself going back to more often than others, and what you find from a sensory perspective, what they add to the beer, the kind of character that you like to pull out using them.
Sure. We make a number of beers with turmeric. That's a really fun one. We make an IPA with turmeric. We've put it in saisons. Mushrooms. We really like brewing with mushrooms a whole bunch.
How do you brew with mushrooms?
So we've experimented with putting mushrooms in hot side, roasted mushrooms before, and put them into secondary. For instance, oyster mushrooms we've done into secondary and roasted them, and they almost took on like a chocolatey profile that then was really cool in the final product. Chanterelles are obviously really well known for being like very apricot forward. Those went into the boil of a beer that we made. We we're in talks right now with Paul Stamets and his crew. Paul Stamets is like a incredible mushroom fungi guru. So we're hoping to get a collaboration on the books with him right now. We've gotten to work with Sandor Katz a number of times on beers, one of which being Kvass, which I think is a cool thing for us to talk about. Kvass we've brewed maybe 8 or so different Kvass interpretation styles at this point, some of which have included pretzels in the mash and all coming from local bakers. We did a most recent one with second use strawberries after creating our heavily fruited sour called Rhythm Rug. So, we're kind of all over the place with ingredients that we like to use.
Tell me a little more about that, Kvass brewing process. I'm not as familiar with it as I probably should be.
I feel like there were a few folks who were doing it before we were, for sure. And we sort of just kind of made up how we wanted it to be, because like a true Kvass is like, I feel like, almost like sometimes get like freaked out about am I culturally appropriating Kvass? And I just don't know if that's like a thing anybody, is thinking, but
it's not protected like lambic.
It's not so much. No. So, we kind of took the idea of a Kvass, which would have been back in the day stale bread, soaked in water and fermented naturally, and fermented open. And then they like, this was very popular like Eastern European bread based drink, and would have probably been more like a kombucha, and very low ABV, maybe a little bit tart, and it was often flavored with whatever was on hand, apples, beets, caraway seeds, lemon, birch, a variety of things like that. So we kind of started running with that concept of like, let's make like imperial Kvass. And for us, that was like often making like 3%, mixed culture beers that often, employed the use of bread in the mash.
See, it's coming full circle with your early baking experience right here. I'm seeing how this all fits together.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, honestly, like it's super romantic, right? I mean, like beer and bread are like, they're literally the same thing.
Yeah.
One's a solid and one's a liquid. Like the absolute only difference.
What's the key then secret to making a good Kvass?
I feel like there are so many different ways to approach it just because it's so subjective. And for us, we've even changed how
there's the classic brewer answer. It depends.
Yeah, it depends. Well, because ours have always been a mixed culture beer, and then we started experimenting with like, well, what if we don't do a mixed culture kvass? What if we did, clean beer with with kvass style? And so we released it's probably 6 months ago, we released a beer called Dip on the Dough, and it was a 2.8% hoppy kvass with lemon and caraway seed, and we canned it, and as you can imagine, a 2.8% canned sort of hoppy offering didn't really like fly off the shelves.
You did your market research on that one.
Oh man, yeah, that was a little bit rough. My business partners were like, "Can we not can 30 barrels of a 3% kvass again?" It's like, yeah, deal. So, but we also just did an 8% kvass inspired. It was basically a double IPA with with the veil, and when we used a lot of bread in it, the recipe, like the quantity of bread didn't change per barrel that we like to use, but it just came across much more like a DIPA than anything else. So
DIPA. I've noticed the brewers down here, they refer to them as DIPAs and NIPAs.
Yeah.
And pronouncing NIPAs. Yeah. Right.
Well, what do you mean? How do you refer to it as?
I try not to pronounce the acronym if I don't have to.
Double IPA.
Imperial IPA. Something that. Sure. I use a lot more words, but I'm wordy.
Well, if you're not using the acronym, then do you go double India Pale Ale? That just gets drawn out.
There you go. Today, you guys are doing something first out here at Whippoorwill Farm, and you are brewing your very first Cool Ship beer.
That's right.
Your wild ales in the past have used different kinds of cultures, but ones that you've cultivated in some way or another, or caught and then pitched. But
that's right.
This is a first for you, doing a turbid mash and going through the whole Cool Ship process.
Yep. Incredibly exciting, and it's really cool how it worked out having you all here for this. Slightly stressful as well, but we've always been enamored with the process and have been making true mixed culture, barrel fermented, barrel aged, what have you, beer from our our inception, and the time was never right for us to have a Cool Ship. Thought about having, I love like the Arizona Wilderness guys. They have their like the mobile Cool Ship. We thought about that for a while, drive it out to the gorge or something, and then drive it back. But then this place happened, so we're just kind of patient about it. And even though year after year it gets a little bit frustrating because you're like, well, that could have been year one, that and would end up going into our 3-year blends. And so, we just stuck with it. We were patient, and we just kind of kept trying to learn for ourselves when we were making, we refer to it as sour base. When we make sour base, that end up going into, all of our fruited sour beers, we make it in a lot, in the same way, in a lot of ways as like, how you would make a spontaneous, how you would prepare, spontaneous wort. We weren't doing turbid process before, but we were doing really similar ratios of barley and raw wheat. We were using aged hops. We were shooting for really high mash temps, longer boils, those things. So we were kind of trying to emulate it in some ways, but then being very, very cautious and very, just really not wanting to call it spontaneous, because it obviously wasn't, it wasn't spontaneous. And, even though like we've been using the same cultures, in Solera method style for 4 years, and so which have run the gamut through like, tons of different, we don't pasteurize anything. We just started doing that last summer for fruit beers that went into cans, but that's a different story. But anything that's going into our mixed culture beers, none of it's pasteurized. So like, botanicals, fruit, what you name it, all of the stuff is just going in with, we wash it off, and then, if there's something on it, it's just sort of welcome to see what happens. So we have noticed, our mixed cultures over the years evolve for sure. So there is some level of, spontaneity that's going on in there, but it's certainly not employing like true spontaneous methods. So then, when we moved out to this farm, it was like, this is just such a picturesque, beautiful place to start, our spontaneous beers. And we don't know what we're going to call them yet. We have a little bit of time for that. But
you've got about 2 years before they're even worth tasting. So
that's right. Yeah. Today's really a monumental day for sure. I mean, this is something we've been thinking about for the longest time, and I've been watching our friends, make really, really beautiful spontaneous beers for a number of years now, and we're just really, we're so stoked to just kind of like enter into that.
What is
realm.
it, in particular? What do you, what is the allure of that? Why, make a spontaneous beer versus something that you can, use a culture that how is going to behave with?
Sure.
I mean, this is another big risk that your business partners may hate you for at some point down the road, right?
Yeah, for sure.
2 years in, we've put all of this stock back into some barrels, and none of us want to blend or drink it.
That's right. Yeah, man. I didn't think about that. We should just cancel today. Yeah, I mean, I think it just kind of takes the romanticism one step further. I mean, it takes it to it's like the final frontier of making, everyone romanticizes, Belgian, beer, and for a good reason, I think. A lot of it's just, it's uncontrolled. It's, it's proven in a lot of ways compared to like, how Germans make beer and different things like that. Like a lot more was just kind of like, really, really free and really open. And so, it's just that
it's more jazz than electronica, I guess.
That's right. Yeah. And that's why we want to be jazzy, and it's like I feel like we've almost reached, like the crescendo. So we're just like wanting it to be like, this is it. So this is it. And, and
this is your bass drop.
Helicopters. Mm-hmm. And so it's, and it could fail for sure. I mean, I hear a lot of people talking about, having to dump barrels, and
right.
Of course we're prepared for that. Which we will do if we have to. And but
there's something about that strikes me as connecting to people who have been here and will come to the farm, will see that brewery and that infrastructure and the future cool ship room that you're building in this 100-something-year-old dairy former dairy farm and old buildings, and building that idea of a place and the experience that they have here, and because it is gorgeous. I mean, it is a beautiful place to work, and I imagine it's a beautiful place to drink beer for those that come and sit out here. But to be able to take away something, and drink something at some point in the future, no matter where they are, that reminds them of this place and this time and the experience that they had here in that connecting way. I mean, that's the stock and trade that wineries in Napa, Sonoma, Paso, others, have been able to, build businesses on, because, you visit the winery, you have that experience of that thing there, and now, and you see why it tastes the way it tastes. And now, even if you're back home, across the country, the sip just kind of evokes the feeling and that sense memory, and that sense memory, is that important thing. It's not something you can quantify exactly, but
that's right.
But it does get pulled out by this kind of spontaneous beer.
Yeah, and certainly, I couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, I mean, and that's what we ultimately want, and that's what we want with, making a lot of the beers that we have been making. I mean, again, like, not to to bring them up again, but Scratch. I mean, the first time I went there and had their beers, and having like toasted bark in a beer. When we do a variety of beers like that here now, like we have a Baltic Porter fermenting in the tank that we used a lot of shag bark, hickory bark in, and so when I taste that beer, it reminds me of Scratch, and so like they did something to me that is just truly, I find, unique, and that it can really just, you can have a drink of something and it just shoots you right back to that place. And if we can come close to doing something of the same, I mean, that's just such a powerful thing to be able to offer people. And, I don't know if we do that, and I don't know if the Cool Ship is going to necessarily, do that. I think that's just kind of the funny part about, for the longest time, people thinking that this, meaning spontaneous beers, couldn't be really done anywhere outside of Belgium. And so it's just like, then a lot of people started, doing them, and it's just like a lot of the microbes are the same. And so like, but, we hope that there's going to be, subtle differences between, maybe our malt has, something to do with the final product being different, as well. And then obviously, the microbes will be different, but, at the end of the day, it's going to be, sort of the same. But hopefully it captures like the essence of us.
I think that's interesting, and what you're saying is I think exactly right. I know Trevor Rogers has talked at length about that from Tegard, that they're not trying to make lambic, they're trying to use a similar process, but they need to create recipes and do it in a way that makes beer that they like to drink. The process might be similar, can't be the same. An American sour beer, an American spontaneous beer, American brewers are going to have to figure out the traditions, the recipes that even may work differently in different geographic areas. What works in the hill country of Texas, when Jester King does it, it's going to be different than what Tegard does, which is going to be different than what you do here,
That's right.
Which is going to be very different than what Beechwood is doing with their spontaneous stuff in Southern California, where it never gets cold.
That's right.
I'm still fascinated by how they brew spontaneous beer there, but it is fantastic. It's delicious stuff.
I always check the temperatures when I see people like posting about that stuff, and I'm like, man, it's 70 degrees today, and it's only dropping down to like 55. It's like, oh, cool.
But
yeah, Jester King as well, right? I mean, like, they're
just because the Belgians have done it one way doesn't mean it's the only way to do it.
Well, and I think that's the cool part about like the American ingenuity. I mean, like Jester King has a cooling coil, and they essentially have a heat exchanger in their cool ship, and to help aid in the cooling. Like, who says that
if they need it? Yeah.
If they need it, yeah. Who says that it has to be only cooled by the night temperatures? So that's why it is. It's really interesting.
And some of those, I imagine, if stuff pops in there that they don't like, they end up with barrels they don't blend in, and they lose it. But then at the other end of it, you could end up with something completely different that adds a different kind of texture to your blending stock in the final blend.
For sure,
that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
And I think that's like that's the trick right there too, is really understanding. Like, we all talk about ourselves as blenders in the beer industry, folks who are making a lot of mixed culture, a lot of fruited sour beer or whatever. Like, and I would certainly have never used that term for myself or for what we do from previously, because I had a very set number of barrels that it was just like I don't really have a luxury of blending. Like, I just kind of hoped everything worked out well, and it was just like, well, I have 4 barrels that are filled with blackberry sour beer that came off the fruit that went back into barrels, and I hope all these are awesome because they really all need to get blended together. I'm not taking like barrel 1 and barrel 100 and barrel 150 and blending them together. Like, maybe we'll get there one day, but so that's going to be certainly the trick of like understanding what all of these different barrels are doing that are going through spontaneous fermentation, and so really truly becoming a blender, and not someone who's just been making sour beer for a very long time now. This is going to be a totally different thing.
So what's the next year and the next 5 years look like for Fonta Flora?
And staying open. Yeah, being a business would be great. Staying
open, is it that much pressure on you?
Last year 2018 was difficult. Yeah, it was it was a difficult year. Not to make it sound terrible or anything. I mean, like, we're clearly, we're doing just fine, but like, the craft beer scene is very different from even when we wrote the business plan to like come out here, and let alone we're in a place where there's a Dollar General store and a post office and nothing else. So it comes with challenges. We don't have people, that are just walking by who can just come in and buy our beer every day. So, it's very challenging. When we finally started brewing last January, we thought, maybe foolishly so, I thought that I was going to package everything in half barrels, and it was going to go to like, a certain number of accounts, and it was going to fly, and people were just going to keep buying that. Turns out nobody wants to buy half barrels. People only want sixtels, and people only want cans. So, we were just like, our business model had to change rapidly. And so we started brewing in January, and then we started mobile canning in March, just because we were like, where is this beer gonna go? And so 2018 was learning. 2019, we know what we need to do, and we have beer going select amounts into different states for distribution. Very carefully curated. Not sending IPAs too far from home, that kind of thing. Trying to make more mixed culture beer, sending those to faraway places just because of the stability. I guess just further makes people know us for mixed culture beer. So still the same thing's going to end up going on. We're just continually focused on quality. That's our biggest thing. I wasn't going to put beer in cans because I was worried about the quality. And then we invested in all of our own, our equipment to really dial in our QC program is incredible. And the beers that are going into our cans and our bottles, it's the best that it's ever been. And, so for us, it's just continuing along that path of creativity, but first and foremost, quality, getting this farm up and running. And actually, we have fruit trees that have been planted, but we want to have annual gardens. So that's going to be a huge thing for this year, really hoping to pump some stuff out of our annual gardens, just trying to make the best beer that we can. And we're all having a blast doing it. And we have a tasting room opening up in Charlotte coming in June. So that's going to be a really positive thing for us. So,
Sounds great. I think that's a great spot to wrap things up here on the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. Thank you all for listening. If you have any questions, you can or suggestions for the podcast, you can email me at jbogner@beerandbrewing.com. Todd, if they want to learn more about Fonta Flora, where do they go?
You can go to check out our website, check out our Instagram.
Is that fontaflora.com?
Fonta Flora Brew. Maybe fontaflora.com. Yeah, and I'm pretty. You gotta
sharpen your marketing message.
Yeah,
here.
I know. Yeah, it's Fonta Flora something. Just Google it. But yeah, you can. Yeah, you could guess it. But Todd at fontaflora.com. If you have any, feel free to shoot me a line.
Cool. If you enjoyed the podcast, we hope you subscribe to the podcast on whatever podcast platform that you use. And if you want to read more about brewers like Todd, who are pushing the conversation of brewing forward, subscribe to Craft Beer and Brewing magazine at beerandbrewing.com. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Before I end, I just want to thank this episode's sponsors. G&D Chiller is the brewing industry's premier choice for glycol chilling. Join your peers April 8th through 11th in Denver for the Craft Brewers Conference and Brew Expo America. Bring the world to your brew house with select ingredients from BSG. And Ska Fabricating is the craft industry's leading choice for packaging line automation. Cheers. We'll be back next week. Todd, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much. Cheers.
This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing magazine, creators of the annual Brewers Retreat. To brew on the Maine Coast June 9th through 12th with legends like Vinny Cilurzo of Russian River, get tickets now at brewersretreat.com.